I want to make a quick response video to a set of videos I watched this morning by someone called Mr. Cropper, who I've not seen before. It's a series of 4 videos kind of declaring war on Professor Anton. And there's a few things with it. There's only one bit I want to pick up on, but I can't resist just mentioning a couple of things first. The first is the inescapable irony of using 4 videos, just short of 40 minutes, to complain about the verbosity of a 10-minute video. Spending 40 minutes to say how long and boring a 10-minute video is. Something slightly ironic there, so just passing over that for a moment. And passing also over the apparent complete obliviousness of reading from a transcript of a spoken video without recognising that written words are very different to conversational language. What you really need to do, Mr. Cropper, I would strongly advise this, is make a transcript of one of your own videos and just have a look at it in the same way. Because I've got to tell you, you make this Kantian, you'd say this Kantian thing about 6 times. You go off on endless tangents, and only one of which, and I have to credit you with this one, you do recognise at one point that you go off on a tangent. We all do it. It's called conversation. Conversation requires repetition and feedback and loops. And it is at least partially about probing and not quite knowing what you're going to say before you say it. It's different to written words. But passing over that for a moment, and of course passing over the, I'm not sure if it's a paradox or a hypocrisy of kind of celebrating the openness of YouTube culture while simultaneously claiming that your aim is to get Professor Anton to erase his channel. For fuck's sake. I mean, just passing over that, I've got to pick you up on this academia thing. Academia. I mean, you make it very clear, you know, that you've done some kind of a degree. I think, you know, you mentioned the sophists and you mentioned philosophy, so I'm guessing you've done some kind of a philosophy degree. You certainly indicate that you have expertise in that area to the extent of charging us 10 quid a time to have a look at your videos. But, you know, I mean, do you know what academia is? I mean, do you know how it works? Because you seem to have a bit of a confusion here. One of the things you pick up on is Corey Anton's reference to quality videos, quality academic videos on YouTube, of which there are some. And he mentions interviews and lectures by established academics. And you seem to think that the idea that there could be an academic video that's different to a YouTube video is, I don't know, well, you seem to think there's some kind of weird elitist thing going on there, or some outrageous claim. But if you've been in academia yourself, which you know, there is a difference between YouTubing, which is what I'm doing now, what you do, what Professor Anton does, and doing a lecture for video and putting it on YouTube. Professor Anton's videos, they're full of content derived from books, and obviously he is well read, as you rightly point out. But they're not academic videos in any formal sense at all. And I know that Professor Anton will be the first to say that. I mean, one of the pleasures of YouTube is that you can do what I'm doing now. You can whack off about things without really being quite sure what you're talking about. I mean, certainly the reason why my channel is called Steam from the Half Bakery is because I like half-baked ideas. It's half-baked stuff. Conversation. And a lot of the most pleasurable conversations I've had on YouTube have not been academic in a formal sense. They've been conversations in which 2 or more people get together and try to find ways of talking to each other that's interesting and stimulating. That's kind of the point, really, of conversational language. Academic language is different, and academic videos are different. And the kind of videos that Corey's referring to there, which you should know this, I'm sorry, you really should, are academic videos that come out of academic processes, not conversational processes. And just in case we're not absolutely sure what an academic process is, an academic process is one in which a set of ideas, a claim to knowledge, if you like, there's a bid for it to be established. And that bid might take the form of a submission to a peer-reviewed journal. It might take the form of a manuscript being submitted to an academic publisher. It might take the form of a paper being presented at an academic conference. It might take the form of a PhD submission, which you defend the thesis at that stage. And the point of those processes is, it's not YouTubing. You know, when you do your video, when you do your conference paper, or you do your academic submission to a peer-reviewed journal, it's not YouTubing. You're putting what you know in front of the people who know that area best. You know, you're not asking some cokehead at 4 o'clock in the morning in between bites of pizza to look at your stuff and see what he thinks. You're asking the people who know the most in the area that you're working to tell you whether what you say has any value at all. That's what you're asking. And it's a very, very rough process if you've never been involved in that process. If you've never been involved in that process and you find some of the commentaries that you get on YouTube difficult, then I would advise you to stay out of it, because there's a lot of rough and tumble in academic publishing. And if you really want your self-esteem lowered, and if you really want to feel stupid, try submitting something to a peer-reviewed journal and having the people who are most skilled in the areas that you are working have a look at what you're talking about. And it needs to be that way. I mean, the whole point of academia, as I'm sure you know, is that it's about trying to advance the sum total of human knowledge. And of course it's glitchy, and of course there's problems with it, and there's there's lots of inherited histories which make it a bit elitist in places. I completely accept that, and there are still many barriers to entry for that world. It's not too bad in the UK, it's relatively cheap to get educated, but I know there are still lots of problems over that. But it isn't YouTubing, it's academic publishing. And those videos that Professor Anton's referring to, you know, lectures by people who've been through that process, whose work has been critiqued by people who are far better at critiquing work than you will ever be, are worth looking at. You can turn it off if you don't like it or you don't understand it, but you know, it's just stupid to say that it's a level playing field. It's bumpy, and those aren't the bumps of elitism, those are the bumps of specialism. And if you don't recognise that, then you need to think again. And just on this academia thing, you know, because there is a certain amount of kind of inverse snobbishness about universities and about intellectual language and about academia. And some of it's justified, you know, of course, some of us, and I'm not excluding myself here, some of us do use when we're feeling self-conscious or when we're feeling put upon perhaps, we might well use our academic credentials, if we've got any, to bolster our ego, you know, try to make ourselves smart. And I certainly know people who for completely personal reasons, need to feel like the smartest person in the room at all times, and will use their academic credentials to try to demonstrate that. But that's a side effect, you know. I mean, academia at its heart is a beautiful thing, really, and I know many people won't believe that. But I mean, just give some examples of what I mean by that. I mean, I work in academia. I work at a university, and probably about 30% of the students that I come in contact with are first-time attenders, which means that no one else in their family has ever attended a university. That's an enormous leap for many of those students, enormous. You know, some of them have very great difficulty in the early stages. You know, many of those will have come from backgrounds in which the environment, just the physical environment of being in a campus where there's things like libraries and where there are things like lecture theatres is completely alien. Never mind the language and the kind of social codes that go on in those environments. But they do it, you know, about 30%. And some of those come from backgrounds which make it very difficult to support their education. So, you know, I've got students who, you know, work at every hours that God sends outside of class time in sandwich shops to try and make ends meet and try and do it. And they do it. You know, most of them manage to get through, and some of them go on to do further education, masters, and some of them will even go on to do doctorates, I would hope. And that's to be applauded, because to do that, you know, you don't get that by snorting coke at 4 o'clock in the morning and making wry comments about someone else's video. Nor do you get that, quite honestly, by looking at someone else's rambling, albeit intellectual rambling, and then ramble yourself for 4 times as long. You know what I mean? You would not get that. You get that by staying with it and focusing down and deciding that rather than just participate in the conversation, which is very important, rather than participate in the conversation of human life, you also want to contribute to the sum total of human knowledge. And you will go to war when you do that. I mean, you will go to war. When you submit a paper to a peer-reviewed journal, you are effectively holding your ideas up to be assaulted by experts. When you defend your PhD, you are standing in front of a group of experts answering questions live on the hoof about what you've spent the last 4, 5, 6, 7 years of your life doing. And I think that's to be rewarded. I really do. And the idea that oh well, it's just YouTube. You know, YouTube is YouTube, and everything on YouTube is exactly the same. Everything on YouTube has got different purposes, you know. And I'll be honest with you, Mr. Cropper, I have no idea what the purpose of your 4 endlessly prolix, endlessly diuretic videos are for.